After several years, I got the hang of most of the hard jobs. The trick was, if you couldn't avoid it, you better get stuck in and move on. In 1971, decasualisation came not overnight, but after years of tough negotiation. This was the first time that the deep sea dockers were paid any kind of a regular week's wage. A wage was made up of whatever work you did at a ship, and if no ships were in port, you would get a payment called fallback pay. This was by no means sufficient to get you a mortgage, but it was preferable to going to the labour. The system of employment changed. No more looking up at the faces of the foreman and living in hope. Now everything was done in alphabetical order or numerical order. It ensured that brothers, cousins and namesakes all began working together, but it remains to be seen if this was a better system. The biggest change that came at this time was the shift to palletised cargoes and the introduction of containers. A new company arrived to take over all stevedoring, owned totally by Dublin Port and Dockworkers. I suspect they moved in on the other companies because of a lack of investment by the stevedores, who built facilities in other ports, like George Bell, who took all their work to Rosslare, where they built a new container handling facility and moved out of Dublin, never having owned a crane or even a forklift truck. Dublin Maritime was another company who reinvested its profits outside Dublin. They set up a new facility in Waterford, taking work out of Dublin. So it came to pass that all deep sea dockers were now in the employ of a company called Dublin Cargo Handling, 100% owned by the Port Board. Things changed drastically then. This company took health and safety seriously, and we began a system of training for each and every man who had an interest in driving equipment such as forklifts, 2 tons to 40 tons, bobcats, mechanical diggers and cranes. The next move for me was to do a course in training all dockers for all jobs described. I became assistant to the training instructor, but I was left to do most of it myself, as the instructor was also a foreman and was hardly available. We set up training courses which turned to competition courses with lots of winners' prizes, cash and other stuff. We had winners in the All-Ireland competition as well, so our training was paying dividends. To sum up my entire working life on the docks, it has to be said that by any man's standard, a fantastic job to work in. Every single day brought you a different experience. It was like working in a different job every day of your life. In my 46 years, I experienced the highs and lows a person would get from any job. But with that, I got almost military standard backing when things went awry. Looking back now, I don't think we really understood what we had. And if I could turn the clock back, I would be rewinding straight away. Would I do anything different? I don't think so.
This poem is about Anna Livia, the head of Anna Livia, what she witnessed for the last 200 years on Dublin docks. It's called Heads in High Places. Anna Livia, you saw them come and go, with heads of hair covered in slack and coal dust, and sweat that ran down wet and wasted faces. Yes, you saw them come and go. When work was scarce and men on rainy days, standing on cobblestones, begged up in the boss men's faces, "Pick me, I'm your man, please pick me." But the boss man looked down, with not even a frown, and said, "We only job our cronies, and if you want to join the gang, come up and see me in Maroney's." Yes, you saw them come and go. When sailing ships were moored, and starving men like poor hewers jumped aboard with number 7s on shoulders mounted high, and without any hesitation called the first mate and cried out to the nation, "This hatch is ours for the taking." Yes, you saw them come and go. And when men were stripped to the waist while bushling wheat, corn and maize, you heard them cry out loud, "There must be an easier way of making a living than breaking our backs for this lousy shilling." Yes, you saw them come and go. When kids came down from all corners of town with hunger in their faces, you just looked on without even a yawn and mumbled with granite faces, "Dublin is going to blazes." Yes, you saw them come and go. In Black 47, when starving people were going to heaven, you hung low from Carlisle Bridge, and not a tosser did you give. And the people cried out to the British nation, "Please deliver us from starvation, as we are a dying nation. And we don't want to see any more hunger on our shores." But the English with deaf ears gave us little but salt tears, and maybe the odd boat ticket in our hands. And they called this generosity, while ethnic cleansing our land of poverty. Yes, you saw them come and go. Yes, you saw them come and go. Thank you.
In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone, as she wheels her wheelbarrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She was a fishmonger, and sure it was no wonder, for so were her mother and father before, as they both wheeled their barrows through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive. the end of sweet Molly Malone. Now her ghost wheels her barrow through the streets broad and narrow, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, if I fall in the Liffey, if I fall in the Liffey, if I fall in the Liffey, if I fall in the Liffey.
Five-dimensional sounds. Yeah, but it's just so amazing.
Hey, is that a boat? Are you two together? If I didn't have my glasses on, you wouldn't even see. There's no logic to it. No battered sausage.
No fucking way.
Whoa!
Yeah, let's go! Yes, yes, yes! You broke the red light!
And then they set off. The signal was the Angela spell.
Boom!
The most expensive weekend ever.
Boom! Boom! Alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh, crying cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh.
I started as a junior clerk in Dublin Docks in 1973 at the age of 18. In Dockland terms, I would have been considered as half a gobshite, foolish but not deserving of the full title. Added to my lack of cop-on was an overriding desire to be popular and to be accepted. This combination was to lead me into many a tight corner. My dad, Martin, had a saying. In actual fact, he had hundreds of sayings, some of which were in total contradiction, such as the man who made time made plenty of time and tide waits for no man. In this case, I'm referring to it's better to be born lucky than cute. And as life has progressed, I've depended time after time on my own good luck. In 1973, I lived in Ballybock on Orchard Road. For me, working on the docks was like entering an alien planet. I found myself working with dockers and checkers, some of whom could trace their family involvement in the docks back 5 and in some cases 6 generations. My dad was a builder's labourer hailing from Wicklow, while my mum was from North Strand. I was assigned to the wages office with Pat Walsh and Joe Keenan. It was an exceptionally busy office. Using checkers dockets, I had to calculate the dockers' daily pay. Each day, the dockers would come to the hatch to check their previous day's pay, and it was then that I was introduced to the banter. I also had to pay a gratuity to cranemen who were not employees, but who were paid a top-up for a job well done. The auditor insisted that they sign a docket each time I paid them, but he wasn't amused when the majority of them signed as Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck.
Does it give off different sounds? What do you take from that? Do you meditate or something? And just to hear you say that there's sounds. I've seen you from over there. And I says, we were walking that way, and I says, come on, we walk this way. The girl something might be wrong, you know? So come on, we say, is she okay?
That's our seed. We'll have slow seed passing results right there.
Is sewage do much use? It's not so much the sewage, it's the stuff they put into it. It's the cleaners for the toilet and the aerosols and all that shit that fucks the fish up. You pump out raw sewage, it's not bother the fish later. A lot of the local boats fish there, and I wouldn't imagine the sewage do much use. It's not so much the sewage, it's the stuff they put into it. It's the...
They will look back to 2019, 2020, and they will look around, they'll look at us and say, what did these guys do? The next generation will not be able to gather here to do something about this.
Yeah, that means it's fucking miles around it. For the dog. He's out there, look, he's after eating the stuff. He can't move. Turn and look at
campaign, the leakage reduction program, or water conservation, please press 3. If your query is in relation to the First Fix campaign, the leakage reduction program, or water conservation, please press 3.
Fish there, I wouldn't imagine the sewage do much use. It's not so much the sewage, it's the stuff you put into it. It's the cleaners for the toilet and the aerosol.
Water. We advise you not to use any water. We advise you not to use any water. We advise you not to use any water. We advise you not to use.
Lead, chromium, nickel, cadmium, arsenic, zinc, organic carbon, alkalinity.
When your water does return, water pressure can be initiated, which will slowly return to normal after a few hours. If some discoloration is present, please run the tap for 5 to 10 minutes. More information on what to do in the event of an outage can be found on our website, water.ie. If you are affected by a water disruption, we advise you not to use any water-efficient appliances, such as washing machines or dishwashers.
Chloride, orthophosphate, ammonia, ammonia saline, aluminium, iron, manganese, copper, lead, chromium, nickel, cadmium, arsenic, zinc, total organic carbon, alkalinity.
If some discoloration is present, please run the tap for 5 to 10 minutes. If some discoloration is present, please run the tap for 5 to 10 minutes. If some discoloration is present, please run the tap for 5 to 10 minutes.
So I was lucky to have worked with James McCain. James started as a seaman, and on shore he became a gearman. Later on, the rules were bent and he became a docker. He died tragically in the hatch of a ship. Dockers used to honour deceased dockers by carrying their coffin from some distance to the doors of the church, where the family would then take over. This tradition continued for many years on the north side and the south side of the Liffey. It now only continues in Ringsend, thanks to the efforts of Boy Murphy and Lardone. In the case of James McCain, Danny Gann stepped out in front, some distance from Our Lady of Victory's Church on Ballymun Road, and nearly gave the hearse driver a heart attack. A particular docker who I had several runs in then asked me if I wanted to be the first to carry the coffin. Another docker overheard it and said, "No way, he is not a docker." But the first one, who you didn't argue with, said I was to do it, and it was the greatest honour of my entire life.
In the early 90s, Dublin Cargo Handling decided their marriage with the deep sea docker was over. They liquidated the company in a way that surely had to be against the law. As the parent company, they had astronomical assets, but they were directed by one of the most corrupt governments this country has ever seen. We were on the Labour once again, only this time not for a day or two, but if they had their way, for eternity. Liquidation is an impossible opponent to do battle against. It's tediously slow to get anything done, and the frustrations of waiting for decisions to be made in offices of the appointed bodies are tortuous. However, we are resourceful people and stubborn as mules, and during the period we were out, April to December 1992, several offers were made to groups and individuals to return to work under shady circumstances. But not one docker applied for those positions. They stood together to a man. We were forced to enlist in FOSS before any kind of payment would be made because we were in limbo as far as the authorities were concerned. We were not on strike because we had no employer to picket. We were not entitled to job seekers allowance because we maintained we were the only workers entitled to operate on the docks when and if it reopened. By December, several legitimate companies appeared to have got the old stevedoring licence back. A system was put in place whereby companies would take on dockers on a permanent basis according to the work they had. Others would form a group to hire and fire on their requirements for each day. It was certainly not ideal, but it was considered better than nothing. My offer of employment came from an old comrade, Jerome Dunleavy, who I had worked with in Dublin Maritime. He represented a businessman named Ted O'Neill, who advanced us 500 quid in anticipation of a fair and decent working relationship, and so it turned out. We got on very well with the crew he had picked, and once again I began to enjoy getting out of bed to go to work. The next years were both enjoyable and fruitful for both parties. until Mr. O'Neill sold the company to the Mersey Docks and Harbour Board. They arrived with a reputation for being a no-nonsense employer, but after a short time we found them to be, if not generous, as in the first days of Mr. O'Neill, they were reasonable employers. For several years we worked under the guidance of Mersey Docks, until something appeared in the stock market in London. Without so much as a hint, we were taken over by Peel Ports. This company, I have to say, provided me with my worst experience of working anywhere ever. They looked for confrontation at every juncture. Nothing we did here in Ireland was done the right way, despite our discharge rate and loading speed being superior to theirs in nearly all of their other operations, and their other holdings were substantial. There was an inevitability about the breakup of relations when everything constantly required the Labour Court to sort out tiny little problems that had previously only needed a 5-minute chat. Day after day, the workforce were put under more and more pressure with silly demands and cuts to wages. They only knew one way, and that was to go for the jugular. When the confrontation came and led to a major strike, every phase of the arbitration within the Labour Relations Council was won by the workers, but never accepted by the company. I find the next episode very hard to mention, as it contains, for me, a sickening memory of some colleagues passing by our picket and working with scabs recruited from the company's other terminals in Belfast, Liverpool and Glasgow. The measure of the company's belligerent attitude was evident in their appointment of a security firm named Control Risks, a firm of mercenaries, ex-SAS soldiers and others. They turned up in the Labour Court with the manager one day to negotiate with us. Of course, we refused to negotiate with them, as we believed them to be carrying guns or other weapons. The head man at the Labour Court was Kieran Mulvey, who was highly annoyed with us and refused to believe us about them being armed, but was gobsmacked when we pointed out to them in the car park searching under their car for bombs. That period of unrest was my worst ever experience on the docks. At the beginning, when the work was sometimes intolerably hard, there was a sense of achievement or a satisfaction in having pushed your body to its limits. But there is no job satisfaction in being treated like a foreigner in your own country.
So in the 1940s, 50s and 60s, all the dockyard communities depended on the work they got on the docks. And no records exist, but we're fairly sure that between 2,000 and 3,000 men went down onto the quayside every day in the hope of work. They stood in what was called a reed, where a foreman was on a wooden platform and he picked whoever he so chose. And he did it in a way that was a bit kind of derogatory because he used nicknames. He didn't use your real name. So in memory of dockers that have passed away, there's now no deep sea dockers employed in Dublin Port, but there's a few still alive. We're going to read out some of the nicknames. So Pop Barry, Slasher Barry, Bida Bean, Swinger Bissett, Blue Nose Born, Glimmer Born, Man from Laramie Born, Shoulders Born, Oxo Born, and Yank Born.
Nudger Keating, Big Nose Kelly, Knockout Kelty, Brother Lawless, Long Balls, Meet Your New Mammy, Follow the Corpse Mitten, Diggin' the Goo Mooney, Tums Murphy, and Nutsy Tool.
And not forgetting Tiddle O'Tierney, the Billy Can bomber, the Polish, the ambassador, the German, the hen pulling, the wicked chicken, the Bleeder Walsh, Bushla Walsh, Miley Walsh, Kitchy Walsh, and Bull Weldon. Thank you.